Hey guys, EST here, so I'll just cut right to the chase. Here's the scenario. There's some sort of food supply disruption, be it, the Great Depression style thing where everybody had to grow depression gardens, or a complete collapse of society, or some big event that kills a bunch of people. Could be a war, could be a societal collapse, could be zombies, could be aliens, doesn't matter. You can't go to the supermarket, and boy, are there not enough squirrels, rabbits, and deer to go around. Because trust me, in America, they'll be extinct after about a month if the food supply collapses. So you could write that off as completely and utterly not an option. But if you're smart, and you're watching this channel especially, you're gonna have, a couple months up to maybe even a year worth of dry goods. We're talking rice, oats, beans, etc. stored away somewhere stable. So you're good for the good portion of a year, at least an entire winter for everyone in your house is what I usually recommend shooting for. So if you haven't seen my video on how to pack, dry goods into Mylar with oxygen-free absorbers and get a couple months worth of food, we're talking a fraction of 1,000,000 calories for $200 total cost. Totally DIY instead of getting it from some other, long shelf life food vendor. Yeah, go check that out, obviously. But when that runs out, or while you're rationing that, you want to get an ongoing food supply going. And like I said, hunting, gathering, everybody's going to be doing it. So let's look at all of recorded human history. Hunting and gathering worked, but it backfired a lot. It was dangerous, unreliable, and took a lot of energy and knowledge. When society really took off and the population boomed and people were healthier and supply lines were established was farming and animal domestication, and I don't know anything about animals. So the obvious scenario I'm saying here is there's some sort of event where the supply chain of food just collapses. Due to this, that, or the other thing, could be just your town, your city, some island you're on, you could be trapped somewhere, or the whole globe or your whole country, or as is the case on my channel always, the reason doesn't matter, here's what you do about it. Also, I hate to constantly shout out my other videos, but while they're important, this is kind of part one and I've already filmed part two a year ago. It's okay, you don't know anything about gardening other than you put seeds in the ground, water, sunshine, and time, and oh look, something came up and I'm gonna eat it. Past that, what makes it fail, and it's what people do wrong or what goes wrong and what to do about it. So that's once you already have the garden. I didn't really do an intro to gardening from a emergency, we gotta do this now, we're not set up at all with any equipment, any fertilizer, anything. And you've got no resources and no way to buy any fertilizer or seeds or whatever. So you're starting from near zero because, you're not gonna get into gardening just to get into gardening, or you live in an apartment and you can't, or you don't have a big enough lot, or you just whatever. But suddenly you're forced into, okay, we need to start growing stuff right now. Well, this is the video for you. So number one, you're gonna need seeds. I mean, if you don't have seeds, you're in trouble. So number one, look at the fridge, look at, what's sitting around. If you're like me, you always have potatoes around because they keep for a month or two. If you don't, you should, because potatoes are the number one survival food, hands down. As far as universal ease of growing in almost any climate, the all kinds of proteins, vitamins, pure, starch, calories, everything. I mean, they got the crazy carbs in there. They grow subterranean, so not many pests, at least in my area, can get to that. So, I mean, they could make a great side dish. I mean, just skin them, chop them up, boil them, and put some cheese or ranch or something on it. There you go. It's filling, it's fairly healthy. There's no reason to not just have potatoes around. It's literally a one ingredient dish, people. Come on. I mean, even baked potatoes, come on. So make a habit of that because you can cycle them constantly. Just make sure you always have them. Now you might think, oh, but I heard store potatoes are different than seed potatoes. That's true. Store potatoes are treated with a certain little powder coating on the outside called an anti-chitting agent, and that keeps them from sending up stems to get some sunlight, get going, and then propagate into new potatoes. So you get new potatoes not from seeds, but by burying a potato, and then it offshoots little smaller potatoes, and usually 10 to 20 pounds of potatoes can turn into up to 200 in a garden in one season. So that's the number one. I mean, a garden without that, you're probably just not even going to be able to grow enough calories to sustain even one person. The next closest is probably beans. I mean, they grow so fast, they keep really long, they've got thick skins, there's all different types, and they contain tons of protein and amino acids. Almost nothing else you grow is going to have protein. And you can just about chuck them into some cracks in concrete and they'll grow. I mean, it's like a weed. You'd almost have to try to kill beans on purpose. So, I mean, a pound of pinto beans at the store is $1. You can literally get them at the dollar store, but those have usually been treated, polished, pre-boiled, all this stuff. I don't think a lot of them or every species guaranteed at the very least would actually sprout. But seed beans are kind of expensive. I think like one packet of 100 that I bought was like $20. Now that's fine, and they probably keep for about 5 years. They're pretty tough seeds. And honestly, you spend like 30, 40, $50, even like $10 on clearance at the end of the season on certain seeds, you could be set for multiple years, at least one entire gardening cycle. And a bean plant can go full size in 40 days under like really good conditions. They're really tough too. They're not picky about water or anything. I mean, they're really, really low effort. Just like potatoes, they're subterranean. They don't need much care. They need a ton of nitrogen, but we'll get into that. And I will say beans put nitrogen from the air into the soil. So growing beans near potatoes or flip-flopping, beds, yeah, but we'll talk about beds and fertilizer in a second. First, we just got to hit on what do you target first. But I guess to finish the bean thing, if you want the cheapest seeds, just find somebody growing beans in the garden, which is everyone, and just say, hey, can you give me a couple pods at the end of the year? And people will be like, yeah, sure. I mean, this one got nibbled on by a rabbit. This one I left on the vine too long, and I was going to toss them or keep them for seeds anyway. I ended up with like 200 seeds, like way more than I thought because I pulled the plants. I'm like, oh, I missed a pod. Speaking of pods, peas are huge. They can get snowed on if they're basically snow peas or some kind of frosty northern whatever. It's always something in the name that implies it can stand up to cold. Yeah, mine got snowed on twice. Last season was really weird. And those things still live. They shot up. They're fine. Their germination speed is insane, and they go to full size in a month. And they actually have like a fairly okay amount of calories. It's not great. It's lower than beans. It's lower than potatoes, but it's something else. And they're really easy to dry and keep for a season to use as seeds. And I think grocery store peas, I'm pretty sure they aren't hybrids. They're heirloom, they're natural, they're non-GMO and all that stuff. I think most of them that you can buy will germinate, will turn into a plant. So speaking of the grocery store, if you're thinking, what should I grow? I mean, just, you could look up a list of like the top 50, top 100 plants grown in a garden or in your area or whatever. You're going to get, carrots, you're going to get onions, you're going to get all the usual staples. You might even get corn, which is a nightmare and I wouldn't recommend it. I'm like an expert gardener and I had trouble growing corn, okay? The amount of work and water and nitrogen and weather and bird repellent and, oh man. And yeah, it's all starchy, but I mean, so are potatoes. Seriously, keep potatoes around. But just, walk around the vegetable section at your grocery store and then look up, if you have a smartphone, like average onion calories, average carrot calories, average cucumber calories. Because cucumbers, that's another one. You can get them in 35 days, full size, like 14-inch long or 8-inch little minis. And that is a filling meal. The problem is cucumbers have next to no calories. They're all cellulose, water, and vitamin E and not much else. There's a reason they don't taste sweet, and it's because they don't have much for sugar in them. So yeah, they're easy, they're filling, they grow quick, and you can get a ton of seeds out of just one of them, like 100 easy. But as far as the food source, they're practically useless. They're a nice little addition, garnish, flavor. It's like cabbage. What are you going to get out of a cabbage? I think an entire head of lettuce, for example, is like 30 calories or something. Celery, don't bother. The stuff is like 10 calories a stalk. So you can just look up, like on general, there's even like public databases, I think, especially in America. There's like some government, like, FDA dietitian stuff where they have like the average so-and-so vegetable has this many calories. You can find them all, just out there as a public service. But generally, if you don't want to go up just blindly looking up stuff, and you also didn't pay much attention in health or biology or chemistry class, sugar, that has calories. Starch, that has calories. That's pretty much it when you're talking veggies. Technically, you can burn protein, but it's not pleasant. So, big starchy potato. Carrots are pretty sugary, but they don't have that many calories. It depends on the type. I'd try it. They're subterranean. They grow pretty slow, but they're pretty covered and not much digs them up or cares. And they're pretty minimal. They just kind of do what they do. And you can fit like 500 carrots in like a, 6x6 area. The problem is acquiring carrot seeds. Contrary to popular myth, you cannot grow carrots from carrots. You can't just chop the tops off and grow it. It'll grow the greens, but it won't regrow the root. And you can eat the greens, but they have next to no calories. All the sugar and stuff is in the base, the carrot part. So, I mean, as far as sweetness and sugar, I'm going to say it, berries, any type of berries. Berries are a little touchy. They're a little sensitive to the pH of the soil. They need a lot of sunlight, and they're kind of sensitive to weather swings, but the amount of calories in just a huge berry bush, and when they go, they go. I mean, berry bushes get huge usually. I mean, strawberries, strawberry plant, couple feet. But if you've ever seen like a full size like mulberry, blackberry, oh my gosh. I think technically mulberries grow into trees. I guess I'm going to touch on that. Don't plant an acorn. First of all, they're awful. You got to boil them like 8 times. And secondly, you are years out from that. And third, just go find acorns. If they grow in your area, then they're probably in your area. Just go gather them up. So nuts, that's another thing. Anything that can be pressed into an oil. So, I mean, if you can grow olives, which I don't know anything about that, can't do that in my area. Peanuts, can't grow them in my area, but, peanut oil, you press them, they got a lot of oils in them. Avocados, they're a giant oil and fat bomb, but yeah, definitely can't grow them where I'm at. And I think avocados, they take years to grow. Those seeds from the grocery store, they will typically sprout though. But here's the thing, okay, I'm going to talk about any kind of seed, domestic or not. So if you're from the US, there is a law that any type of berry, and I'm not sure what else is in the category, it might include avocados, I don't know. They have to be bombarded with a sterilizing level of radiation on their way into the country. 100% of them have to be. To sterilize the seeds, to stop invasive species, and to kill any kind of pest on there. We're talking fungus, we're talking insect, any kind of insect, eggs, anything. Everything is dead, and it doesn't affect the fruit in any way. It doesn't make your fruit radioactive, okay? It's not exposing it to radioactive dust or material. It's bombarding it with the resulting radiation. But that sterilizes the seeds. It tears apart the DNA. It's just gone. So if you've got some raspberries, some blueberries, and some strawberries, and you read on the container, because by law it has to say on the container what the country of origin is. If it says, made in USA, or even specifically like, hey, they're probably from California, it's fine. I guarantee they didn't pay the money to get it radiation blasted. If you have some other berry and it says origin Mexico, those are sterile. Those seeds are useless. And from one little container of blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, you can get a ton of seeds. Now, the germination on almost all berries is insane. They have to spend, I don't know how to explain this. There's a term for it, but basically they have to be in the ground for a winter or they won't sprout. You might be able to fake it in your refrigerator, but who knows if you have power or not. So in some places, berries will grow where it isn't cold, so they won't need that, but they're going to take a long time to sprout. They're really sensitive. And basically, the super hard outer coating has to be broken down, or a certain amount of moisture has to get to the middle through the casing. And that happens after everything freezes, melts, and then it's just water with a little bit of a rising temperature. And as soon as it hits it's spring, boom, that's when it pops up. But if you just, in the middle of March or April, throw them down in the ground, it's not going to work very well. And they're used to hitting the ground in fall. So at best, you can wait another season, but usually when people have a plot of ground and nothing comes up, weeds will take the place, or they'll just grow something on top of it. So berries are tricky, but it's not impossible, and it's a ton of sugar and a ton of acidic vitamins. So vitamin C, I think commonly, very, very commonly vitamin B. I mean, just think berries, B. B12 is really important for mental stuff, and B6, I think, is the energy one, metabolism. Yeah, you need all that. So berries are high difficulty, and you gotta check the country of origin to see if the seeds are sterile or not. But because they're not very popular, if you just go and order, 25, 50, 100 berry seeds from some internet catalog, it'll cost you a couple dollars, and that's it. And might I add that seeds take up next to no space. They're incredibly light, they're incredibly small. You can pack them together in a little tiny container and throw them somewhere nice and temperature controlled and not too hot. But pretty much anything else, there's really no catches to it. You just throw it down, it sprouts, and then it grows, and there you go. And if something goes wrong, you address it. So the number one thing is going to be pests, and there's not much you can do about that. I mean, a lot of fungal stuff you could treat with baking soda or ground up some kind of painkiller. You could look up natural fungal cures and stuff, but that doesn't apply to everybody. But the shelf life of baking soda is basically forever. So, I would get a spray bottle, have a source of water, and I think it's 10-to-1 baking soda ratio. You just spray it on the leaves and it slows down or stops a fungal infection, which is the number one killer of tomatoes. Speaking of that, tomatoes have next to no calories. They're almost a liability with the amount of just fungal issues they all universally constantly have. Kind of same with cucumbers. They are just magnets for funguses, and then all the spores might spread to your other stuff like beans. And that's what happened to mine. It killed my spinach and everything. It was so annoying. Speaking of that, don't grow spinach. It's it's iron and no calories and not worth your time. It sprouts up so quick, it's done in 30 days, but you don't need it. I mean, if I had 10 spinach seeds, I'd throw them down and I'd eat it, put it on as a garnish, whatever. Oh boy, yay, iron and some vitamins and minerals, but the calorie count is basically 0. And that's the kind of stuff you want to avoid. You want to go all high calorie. So berries, beans, peas, potatoes, maybe corn, but it's really hard, and I can't off the top of my head think of anything else. Kind of carrots. Those are the big ones you want to stick to. There are some things I'm less familiar with because they're so disgusting I don't grow them, like beets. I think they have like sugar in them, but just grow carrots. Beets are disgusting. Now the other thing is, if it's dried and cooked later, will it last the winter? Potatoes, absolutely yes. Beans, absolutely yes. You can dry them and cook them whenever you want. Peas, I'm pretty sure you can let them dry and then recook them. It's not popular, but it's not impossible. Carrots, I mean, bare minimum, you could freeze them. You could actually just leave them in the ground. And if it freezes quick enough during winter, if you live in an area where it freezes, yeah, it's doable. They keep for a bit. I mean, you take them out of the ground, they're like gone in like 4 days. But if you find a way to freeze them or just leave them in the ground, dig them out the hard way, yeah, okay. Otherwise, you'll just need a functional freezer. And there is certainly less animals, birds, chipmunks, everything, rabbits and stuff running around in the winter. A lot of stuff leaves, a lot of stuff, migrates, it hibernates. And you can't grow anything while snow's on the ground, that's for sure. So the whole will it keep during winter thing, it just comes back to the big staples I'm naming. And that's why berries are another tough one, because they don't keep past like 3 days after you pick them. But you can mash them into paste, put them in a mason jar, boil them up to a certain temperature, seal them, and okay. But that requires, external stuff. So that's the selection, and that's what to watch out for, what not to. Just gather as many seeds as you can, and if you can, go get, berries or whatever at the grocery store, or go to the, corner market or some kind of gas station or something. They sell them by me. And as I alluded to, it's kind of good to know ahead of time, like I can't go grow grapes in my area. I can't grow peanuts. Those are warm, temperatures only. So just have an idea and ask your gardening friends, or just look around, just take a walk or a car ride or a bike ride through your neighborhood if you got a lot of, suburban gardening types, and just look what people are growing. Now, unfortunately, usually it's in their backyard, but you join a local gardening group or something and say, hey, I just want to kind of learn about it and tour it. Oh my gosh, you will get 100 replies. People want to show off their gardens. In fact, I've got like 3 community gardens around me that I could just go look at. Actually, now that I think about it, 6 that I know of. A lot of people, what they grow there is, low effort, unattended stuff where they don't have to check on it daily. They check on it like every 1 or 2 weeks. So that's one to learn from. What grows in your area and what's really low effort and low skill. Because people don't want to drive all the way out there every day. Oh, that reminds me, I never mentioned sunflowers. Those are actually pretty nuts. Even like poppy seeds, if you eat those, they're mad calories. So real high density seeds, like any edible seeds, that's pretty big. Now, any kind of sunflower seeds you're going to buy at the grocery store, unless they're untreated, natural, that kind of stuff, they're going to be baked. They're coated in oil. They were in an oven. They're coated in salt. They are not going to sprout. So getting them might be an issue, but in some places there's just wild ones or, whatever. Like one sunflower, literally one, is enough seeds to grow, an entire field full of them. So once you get going, the propagation rate and the next year's seed hoarding and collection and stuff, that's really big. Very, very, very doable. You can start with next to nothing and then just ramp up to a ton. So let's talk about where to grow it. Well, you need open, unoccupied soil. That's the big one. So you're just gonna have to rip apart your lawn, maybe dig up some like pine needles and go under it, because they tend to suppress things under it because of the acidity. Generally, you can grow almost anything in not clay. So clay, it's going to squish, it's going to be wet. When you kind of grab it, it doesn't like sponge out into its non-grab smush state. It just kind of, well, you know what clay is. It doesn't drain well, it has no nutrients, and the darker the soil, the better. You want like black topsoil. So if it's kind of dirt colored, brown, it's not very good. It's going to be, real dry and powdery, kind of sandy. You don't want sand. You don't want clay. Those are the 2 ones you don't want. You want anything where like leaves break down or like anything kind of blows into an area and then it all just breaks down into black dirt. That's what you want. And honestly, that's probably what's like constituting your lawn if you have one. So just dig up the grass. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to dig it all up. I'm just going to burn it. That's, I've got a little cup of gasoline. That's enough to light, a good portion of my lawn on fire. So besides the safety issues of that, burnt ashes will change the pH so dramatically it may not recover. Now, it's not like you've got an enclosed garden or like a little 14-inch round thing, and then you put ashes in it and it's self-contained and the pH can't go away or neutralize. It might just seep into the ground low enough and, but it's not the best idea. But in a pinch, it's not a terrible idea, but it's not really the grass blades you got to get rid of, and grass universally will regrow from being burned because it's the roots you got to worry about. And there's usually a couple inches of roots. They're really tough and snarly, and you're just going to have to get out there with something. Improvise a blade to, bend and shape and carve some, cookware into a blade, put it on a baseball bat with duct tape and twine, and there you go. You got a backhoe. You got an axe, a wood cutting axe. Well, guess what? Now it's a, soil tiller. You got to pulverize it, dig it up, wreck the roots, and then just rotate it. Get the dirt on top of the grass, and usually within a very short amount of time, it'll break down and be good. Now, if you can get dirt from anywhere else and haul it, cool. Very visible, very obvious, but if you're still in your house and you're just growing food, well, people are going to see that, and securing it, especially at night when somebody could just, while you're sleeping at 3 a.m., go steal like your entire harvest. Let's just start at square one, which is don't do this in an area where other people could have that happen. And so then if you're hauling dirt into your backyard and people are like, ooh, what are they doing? I bet they're growing food. I'm going to take note of that. Well, don't do it in an area where that's a thing. You got to get somewhere else. And also, sunlight. You need sunlight. I could name a couple things that could grow in shade to, like partial shade to almost full shade, but none of them have calories because you need sunlight as the energy to make energetic particles, like sugar. That's just how it works. Like corn needs ridiculous sun. Potatoes, they need a pretty good amount of sun. Beans, they will grow anywhere. They'll grow in partial shade easily, but a lot slower. Tomatoes, besides being a liability, a disease factory, and just a generally suicidal plant, they need absolute full sun, but also they freak out above like 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I hate them. Don't bother. They are awful. That's sad. I mean, if you just want to be like, I don't know, I'm going to chuck them on the side of my house and see what they do. I'm just going to put them in the front yard, whatever. Yeah, grocery store ones will tend to sprout. I'd say it's not like exactly 50-50, but somewhere in the neighborhood of, okay, some are hybrid just because, and any imported ones are treated, obviously. So they're sterile, but any kind of hybrid, which is quite a lot of them. It might even be more than half. But if you get certain types of tomatoes from the grocery store, you're going to get a ton of seeds out of them, but they don't keep very long, so you're not likely to have them. I will say seedless watermelons, they're a hybrid. They're awful. Also, they tend to be seedless. If you try and grow them, I think those things are sterile. So you get all these like hybrid weird stuff. They just won't grow. And if you want to know, like do a germination test inside. Just almost regardless of the temperature, as long as it's not crazy low, you can just put it in a damp paper towel and keep making it damp every like 1 to 2 to 3 days. And if you see a sprout start coming out of it, there you go. It's probably not sterile. Now, some of them, they're such mutant hybrid, plants that you're going to see a sprout, but then it'll die really quickly. And then, at least you tried. But that's a good way to test one instead of like, I'm going to allocate, 1/4 of my garden square foot that I dug up my lawn for to this, and then nothing, just all dies off, doesn't sprout, whatever. Then you're way behind and you're in trouble. Another thing, just look up the last frost date or early safest planting date or whatever in your area, and then ignore it and plant beans and snow peas anyway. Not all of them. Don't burn up all your seeds if you're going to try and get a jump on it and get like 2, 3, 4 weeks early, because for us, I think it's middle of May to late May. That's like the last safe date, and we've had it snow in May. Yep. But you want to avoid frost because that kills everything. But if it's like 45 degrees at night, your stuff's not going to grow anyway. But we've also had it be crazy warm from like the end of March onward. And then, I could have been growing an entire crop of beans twice before May. Come on. So if you just have so many seeds that you don't care, throw a couple down and see what happens. Or to spend that time doing other things. So I talked about you just got to get some soil, make it brown and make it unoccupied by weeds and grass and chop it all up, kill the roots, till it all up, mix it, all this stuff, because the blades and the grass and eventually the roots will start to grow or break down and they won't grow anymore. If they did, you didn't really bury them deep enough, and it is a good start to burn them, and then if you mix it up enough, okay, cool, but any real pH sensitive stuff is going to freak out, but a lot of that stuff isn't high calorie stuff, I will say that. Beans could not care less about the pH. I think potatoes don't care either, so there you go. Tomatoes, they will freak out. Berries, real sensitive little prissy princesses as far as it goes. And don't even get me started on roses. My gosh, those things are sensitive. But also you generally can't eat them. So besides soil, you're going to need compost, and compost pretty much is soil. A lot of stuff you can't plant it in 100% compost. But what's the difference between compost and soil? Well, not much if it breaks down all the way. Usually when people say compost, they mean like 50 to 75% broken down stuff that still has a lot of little wood scraps, chips, and just little pieces of stuff where it's going to continue to break down. But it's so nutrient dense and it's so like bacteria and worms breaking down over time into really good, nutritious black soil that it's actually going to be too many nutrients for the plant, and it's going to get like a nutrient burn, kind of like a nitrogen burn or like something like that, because plants can't control their uptake of nutrients. They can't turn it off. So if you get ultra rich, like artificially perfect soil where you're just growing it in 100% compost and it's just getting bombarded by nonstop, micronutrients and all kinds of other trace elements and stuff, the plant's not going to do very well. Most of them won't. That said, I think I heard that potatoes can grow in 100% compost. I'm telling you guys, I might as well just label this video the potato video. But compost is really just breaking down stuff. A lot of woody stuff, a lot of like leaves, a lot of plant matter that isn't green. That's carbon, and then the other thing you need pretty heavy is nitrogen. That's just anything green. Like you take blades of grass, throw that in your compost, that's going to be like, I hate to even give a number, but I think like 90% nitrogen, like 10% carbon or something. There's all these ratio charts and stuff, but that's like a little try hard, a little perfectionist, a little, ooh, I want this to grow 3% faster. Just know that you can't use all green stuff and you can't use all woody stuff. And wood stuff has to be shredded, and wood material breaks down a lot slower. So even tiny little twigs and branches, oh, you're looking at years to break that stuff down, and you probably don't just have a wood chipper sitting around. So you can sit there with a knife and chop it up artificially. It's all about surface area. It's can the worms and can the bacteria get to it, and can the fungi get to it, and how quickly. If you just take like a little, half-inch thick stick and throw it in your compost bin, even on the very bottom of it, you're looking at like 3 to 5 years easily to break that down. Now, you run it through a chipper or some kind of just a blade, a machete, whatever you got to do. You could run it through a salad shooter for all I care. You probably break it. But if you turned it into like something you'd put in the bottom of a hamster cage, or like sharpened pencil shavings, like something like that, it's going to break down in probably a season. Now, leaves, anything soft, anything not rigid, that's really thinner cellulose, they're going to have no problem getting in there. But if you got like really long grasses and like full entire leaves, that's going to be rough. I mean, that might take more than a year to break down, and you want it now. You want it as soon as possible. So the fastest turnover with the most ideal stuff poured into it, I heard 50 to 90 days, depending upon conditions, is the fastest you can really flip like pure, I just cut down this grass and this tree and these branches and whatever, into, okay, this is getting mixed into my garden. But every year, at least annually, and definitely starting, you want to mix in as much like bio broken down, like wood chips and wood material, and the nitrogen heavy broken down plant greens and stuff. You want up to 50% of that mixed in with the soil. And if you mix that in with like just garbage, clay, sand, trash, it'll do okay. It's better than nothing. I mean, it's still not great. It'll fluff it a little bit and help with the water drainage issues. But still, clay and sand is devoid of any kind of nutrients pretty much. And the best way to make plants is out of other plants. Now that said, beans get a lot of their energy and material from the air, the nitrogen in the air, and then they put it into the soil through the roots, which is pretty wild. And then a lot of the calories just come from sunlight. So those beans can grow in anything, anywhere pretty much. Now, if you put them in terrible conditions, like half light, mostly clay, yeah, they'll probably grow, but oh boy, it probably at half the speed, if that. So do watch that. So selection and prepping the soil is huge. So you're just gonna have to put in like a couple days, several hours of physical labor, just going to the nearest whatever, oh look, here's some random weeds down the street. We got some just natural growing areas. They got long grasses. They got, dandelions, just whatever's out there. I mean, like where I'm at, you get all kinds of thistles. You get like wild burdock and stuff like that, which you should definitely grab the seeds from. And maple leaves, those are everywhere. Oak leaves, cool. Some pine needles, but be careful with that because that breaks down into really acidic compounds. So you really don't want pine needles anywhere near your compost pit. Which, speaking of that, how to build a compost pit, generally, just don't build it too small that it won't react, and don't build it too big. Don't let it mat down too much, and fluff it a little bit, but don't get so much air that the bacteria and the water can't get to it. And keep it not too dry, but not absolutely drenched. So just kind of the middle on everything, and it's really hard to do it wrong. But generally, like just a pile, or if you can get some kind of cinder blocks or pallets or whatever you can do to kind of build it up, you want it to be maybe like 4 feet by 4 feet, somewhere around there, and then maybe like 2, 3, 4, or 5 feet tall. And then every about week or so, you should try and fluff it, flip it, turn it over, that kind of stuff. So normally you'd use like a nice pitchfork, but I mean, you could get out a hockey stick or just something sturdy enough to really lift some heavy material. And you'll start to see, especially on the bottom, the earthworms, the bacteria, the water, everything, it'll start to just look more like dirt because it is. So you're going to want to get that going as quickly as possible, especially if you need it that season, but even if you need it next season, you want to get out ahead of it. So if you absolutely flood it, you pack it down too much, which grass clippings and leaves tend to kind of mat down way too much to the point where there's just no oxygen, and all the really good bacteria that you want in there are aerobic, not anaerobic, so they need oxygen. If you keep flooding it, you're just going to get swampy, rotting mess. It will break down, but it'll smell terrible, and you'll get some kind of undesirable molecules out of that. But you'll be able to smell it. You actually should not be able to smell, even though it's rotting plant parts, you should not be able to smell a distinctly bad smell out of your compost pile. Also, if you just take a shovel, go right in the middle of it and lift it up, it should steam a little bit. Because all the bacteria in there are actually creating a little bit of a temperature, and it tends to get up like over 100 degrees, even if it's 70 degrees outside. And the hotter it is, the quicker the reactions, unless it gets hot enough to kill off the bacteria, but it's kind of self-regulating like that. Now, if it's pounded way down, compacted, no air, constantly getting water, pooling, you're going to get anaerobic bacteria, which it'll be slimy, it'll be smelly, it will be awful. Anaerobic stuff is nasty. Also, it takes way longer to rot in just like almost pooled water, pretty much. So fluff it a little bit, but don't get it so tall that it's just like a bundle of sticks and a glorified fire hazard, because nothing's going to touch it. The worms aren't going to be able to get to it. So get as much of that, as many piles of that, separate piles, different mixes, different sources, whatever you want. Get that all together. If you got like 4 compost piles going, great, because you're going to need to sprinkle almost all of it, or like quite a lot of it, more than you think, on whatever garden bed you built of just whatever soil you got, especially if you need improving it, like I said, amending it, as they say. So that'll be your fertilizer. I mean, like I said, you want to grow plants, make it out of other plants. So go down the street to your neighbor's yard, go get some bushes, get some trees, get some leaves, get some wild grasses, get some anything growing anywhere. Shred it up the best you can with knives or, I don't know, shovels, whatever you got to do, and not very, hard, stiff stuff, and as little wood as possible, but not none. Throw it all in there, let it rot, and if you're lucky, it'll be there in a couple months. Now, the optimized natural, like I'm not going to totally cheat this and artificially fertilize everything method is called no-dig gardening, and it's a really recent trend. I can't believe like scientists and botanists and farmers and all that are like just discovering this now. This seems like something like Egypt should have had down a couple thousand years ago. But apparently there's networks of like fungal something in the soil. I'm not going to get too much into the science, but basically every time you dig in the soil, you disrupt all the stuff that's going on, and then it's got to rebuild. So that's fine if you're mixing in, synthetic fertilizers or natural fertilizers, bat guano and the whole, seashells or whatever, kelp. People get wild with that stuff. And then it's kind of the cheater method. You're just taking what would have happened naturally and you're just pouring it right into the soil, then covering it back up and mixing it. It works. People do it. But if you just want like subterranean funguses, which are actually good, to keep breaking down every little bit of wood, every little bit of, grass blades, old roots, everything, you don't want to dig. And people did side-by-side experiments where they're like, same temperature, same water, same everything. Look at this when the plants are double the size. Simple as that. Very recent trend. I want to say like 2010 onward. And people have had time, just barely enough time to independently verify this. So if you've got limited fertilizer, you can't just ship in kelp from the ocean. You don't have enough fish heads and leftover chicken to put in there and stuff. Well, then don't dig it up every year, fluff it, or any of that stuff. You don't want compacted soil, but if it's good enough soil prepped well, it should be fine. So to suppress weeds, to suppress pests, and to suppress pretty much everything, what you want to do is just take like 2+ inches of compost and just put that on top of your bed every year, because it's going to shrink down anyway as stuff breaks down. And so the roots of just about anything are going to go down deeper than that. But the compost will just slowly like leach really good breaking down beneficial stuff into the soil as it becomes soil every year. So it'll like your whole garden bed will go down like 2 inches, but then you add 2 inches of, mulch mix cover. A lot of people use straw cover and then just let it break down and whatever. And then pour compost on top of it, but don't dig, don't mix it up. You'll feel like you should, but you shouldn't. If you got enough fertilizer to compensate for it and don't care about subterranean fungal life, okay, cool. But the no-dig method is the way to go because it mimics nature, because nobody's digging up nature. And what happens in nature every season or ongoing or because of old age or just whatever, trees, grasses, plants, bushes, they all fall over, the leaves fall off, they make a nice little, pile on the ground, and then they disintegrate over the next 2 years. So that's basically exactly what nature does, and all the plants that grow in your area are just fine. Now, speaking of that, let's circle back around to where to get seeds. Let's say you're a breakfast burrito and hot dog kind of person, so you don't really keep around a lot of vegetables or potatoes. Seriously, go buy some potatoes right now, do it. Well, you're going to have to walk around your area, find out what the edibles are, and just gather the seeds or transplant them. And direct transplanting is pretty easy. Now you can do it where you like, well, okay, there's two methods pretty much. The burlap method, for lack of a better term, and then the root separation and like root teasing method. So you can kind of pull it up, shake the, soil off, and you're like, okay, those are bare roots. I've got like 12 inches of roots. Cool, I'm going to transplant it. And then you kind of spread the roots and pre-dig the hole, and it's real sensitive, and a lot of them are going to die, and they're going to have something called transplant shock. Or you could say, you know what, I'm going to take this whole area of land and just move it. So the burlap ball tree moving method. Like if you were to buy a tree at a nursery, you're going to buy it in a big old thing of soil with a burlap bag around it. They dug it up, and that's how you transport it. You just do it as is, and then the roots barely even know what happened. You're going to have very, very minimal transplant shock, and then the plant just goes, and the death rate should be next to nothing. So in my area, I'd look for natural rhubarb, which is basically bardock. I know they're technically two different species, but they taste the same, and they're about the same. The only difference with bardock is, and I think this isn't true with rhubarb, is it has a big honking taproot, where if anything goes wrong or you just get too many of them, you dig it up, and it's like a giant carrot. Tastes just like it, actually. So they're easy to spot because the leaves are like 2 feet long, and it looks exactly like rhubarb. It is all over my area. So a big sugary root and then a vitamin heavy like leaf stem. Okay, you can't really eat the leaves, and the stems are just vitamins with no sugar and no calories. Okay, I mean, would I start a bardock farm? Yeah, if I didn't have any other seeds at all. But do note that if you gather seeds from something like that, it usually takes 2 to 3 years to get big enough for you to harvest anything from it. Same goes for acorns, same goes for walnuts, same goes for anything the size of a tree, pretty much. You're just too far away from that time-wise. I mean, feel free to throw it in if you're just like, okay, we're set, and now we want to expand and really go into the future, but other than that, I'm trying to think of anything else. There's some kind of thistle where you can eat it, but it's like almost no calories. It's just like vitamin A and C or something, so I wouldn't really transplant that. Dandelions, you probably, everybody's heard, oh, you can eat dandelions. Yeah, but they have no calories, so what's the point? They make terrible tasting tea, and it's just vitamins and nothing, which, okay, you need vitamins, cool, but I also don't think you'll have trouble finding dandelions, so I wouldn't like plant them in a garden on purpose. I'm trying to think of any other wild edibles with significant calories in my area. There's pretty much nothing. It's a very high longitude, like I said, very northern America. There's not much up here, but you go down to like, Florida or like Texas or California, you might get all kinds of grapes and, those are just little balls of sugar. You've got maybe palm trees. Might have to go more south, but Hawaii, okay. Coconuts, those have got coconut oil. They got the milk. I mean, those things are nuts. Figuratively, they're not actually nuts. But they're bonkers when it comes to calories. But, like I said, it's a tree size. I don't know how many years it takes to grow from a coconut to a coconut tree, but it's probably a lot. And even bamboo that grows crazy fast, and people eat bamboo shoots, but it's just so much cellulose. It's almost like a stir-fry garnish. You throw it in there, and it's like you cook it enough, it'll resemble the hardness of a carrot, but the amount of calories in there is just so low. Basically, any kind of herb, any kind of leafy green, it's out. I can't name one that has a significant amount of calories because it doesn't exist. It doesn't work that way. You're looking for seeds, beans, fruit, and full-blown, full-size vegetables. Those are meant to be eaten. That's what they're designed for. The animals usually eat them and then spread the seeds. That's where the calories are at. You eat anything that's a leaf, it's just not going to do it for you. That said, believe it or not, cauliflower is actually pretty good. But it doesn't grow naturally like anywhere in all of America, or really even most parts of the world. It's insanely difficult to grow. You have to be a better gardener than even me, or even like master gardeners on YouTube to grow that stuff. But yeah, cauliflower is actually fairly good calories. Then in my area, okay, what do they farm? Well, corn, okay. I mean, with such limited options, I'd probably give it a shot. Some grocery store corn is non-GMO, not much of it, but that's a good place to get seeds. Otherwise, just go find a farmer's field. A lot of those, though, are hybrids, too, where they have to buy them every year. So even from a farmer's field, you're probably going to get some kind of GMO sterilized corn where the kernels won't grow. I just realized I stated farmer's field and grocery store as if those are two different things. It's the same corn, it's just chronological order there. But, sweet corn vendors, people just sitting there on the street, but if food's getting tight, I don't think you're going to see those people. But you can buy an ear of corn, let it dry, and then just put it in your basement, put it in a paper bag or a box or something. I wouldn't saran wrap it. It'll probably go anaerobic, and I already told you why that's bad. But dried corn seems to go for a while. So, I mean, it's a possibility if you do it right. You can just at the beginning of Fall, when it's corn harvest season, just pick one up, keep it all winter, and the next spring, if you got an issue and got to plant it, you got to plant it. 1 ear of corn is enough to do it. Just, make sure that you'd ask them, is this heirloom, is this non-GMO? And they shouldn't lie to you. And a lot of people who grow it themselves, they just get it from seed catalogs. They're not calling up Monsanto to grow, 50 stalks of corn and sell it at the gas station. But some of the stuff that you buy at, gardening stores, that's going to be a hybrid, GMO, sterilized. So do at least ask. But in your area, if there's something natural growing, either farmed or not, that you can eat, go for it. I mean, in my area, soybeans, absolutely huge, but I don't think I could reasonably process those. I mean, by the time you pick them, they're super hard, and I don't think you can just boil them and eat them, and you should not eat that much soy. You really should eat no unfermented soy at all. 0 is the correct amount, because it has a very dangerous, estrogen, similar molecule. It's close enough that it might throw off some stuff, at least in males, even females. So if you're just I'm just going to boil these soybeans and eat them, I don't think that's a good idea. That's a pretty big dose compared to just, Taco Bell put 20% soy mix in their beef. Oh, well. So as much as soy is becoming a big staple as a dirt cheap filler to make, meat products at fast food places a little bit bulked up for cheap, that's not going to happen, even though every farmer's field around here is running soybeans if they're not running corn. That's a shame, because I think that's fairly calorie dense. So I've kind of gone over the major staples, but I mean, if you live a lot south of me or in a completely different country, you're going to be saying, wow, this guy's way off with this stuff. But universally, you can grow potatoes and beans and carrots and stuff almost anywhere. And potatoes, you can just take off the shelf basically anything from the grocery store. I don't think there's such a thing as a sterilized potato. Throw them in the ground and it should kind of work. Now, I will say I talked about the anti-chitting agent, and that's the difference between them and seed potatoes, but I never told you how to undo it. It's really simple. Wash the outside and brush it lightly with a paper towel, preferably multiple times. And honestly, it wears off at a certain point. It kind of neutralizes or falls off, so you just kind of want to handle it, wash it, but not enough to really mess it up, get it wrinkly, get it, breaches of the skin that you really want to, not do that. And honestly, seed potatoes are kind of a scam anyway. I mean, they're the easy, direct way to get the best results, but I paid way less than I would have at the garden store for just some, golden or yellow whatever potatoes, my favorite type at the grocery store. I think it was $2.99 for a bag of them. And they did pretty well. I mean, I could tell it was anti-chitting, and I did not wash them enough, and I didn't buy them early enough. But the couple that were chitting, I threw them in the ground. A couple of them just never sprouted. And they just rotted. But the other ones did fantastic. I think on average, every one potato turned into about 5. So yeah, just wash it, rub it, get the surface as clean as you can without destroying the skin. If you destroy the skin, the second you put it in the ground, it's probably going to get attacked by bacteria and worms, and you won't have a potato. It's going to get really rough. So if you've ever kind of forgotten about potatoes somewhere in your house and you're like, oh my God, there's a 6-inch, thing coming out of it. Yeah, there you go. I mean, eventually you're going to get them. Now, any kind of organic potatoes, I don't think they're allowed to put anti-chitting agent on the surface. I might be wrong there, but definitely go that route if you can. Usually organic is just a scam to make you pay double, but in this case, it might actually mean something. Now, I guess the last thing is I think the most efficient meat, depending upon where you live, is generally considered to be rabbit. Now, they found out, especially in South Korea, that these really big species of rabbit, we're talking 20 to 30 pound rabbits, I am not kidding, they were the most efficient, and they made tasty rabbit burgers. And it's because they replicate and get to maturity in depending on species, it's multiple times per year. I know that. I thought I heard 90 days, but it might have been 9 months. I don't remember. Or maybe every 9 months is the average doubling of the population, or I don't know. I think within a year, I thought it was times 4. I don't know. It's absurd. And they just kind of, run around, eat grass, eat this, eat that. They kind of take care of themselves, So if you can fence it in, great. You really just need to catch one of each gender, or at least a couple, to get a good community started with obviously good genetic variation. So if you can snare or trap, preferably obviously live trap, a couple bunny rabbits that are native to your area, because ones in my area are pretty chunky. I mean, they're probably at least a couple pounds apiece. And then you just kind of started a rabbit farm. It's kind of like chickens. They just kind of run around and kick up, dirt and eat grubs and bugs and seeds all day. And then they just kind of, you don't really have to ship in food for them necessarily if you've got a big enough area. And chickens tend to kind of just return to their roost once they're trained. A couple of them might run off, but man, coyotes, wolves, foxes, they're gonna get your chickens. You need to protect them. Falcons even. Yeah, they're targets. Like everywhere. Even snakes will go after like chickens and their eggs and stuff. In my area, it's pretty much just foxes, but yeah, chickens are super easy. Rabbits are also very, very easy, but you need to give them places to hide, and they're pretty quick. They're pretty good at avoiding predators. And at least in my neighborhood, I bet per block, there's probably 1 to 200 rabbits. It's that insane. Every time I pull up at night, about 4 of them scatter. Okay, we all got gardens. We all got plenty of stuff for them to eat. They like our various grasses. They like our low, bushes and stuff, and they like to hide under our porches. So if you got the space, this might be going a little far, but you could buy a couple live traps. Now, I wouldn't just go to, Tractor Supply Company, just buy them and then have no intention to use them, and they're all stainless and they're like $100. Okay, that's a little much. But if you find some kind of janky used ones, kind of broken down, a little bit rusty or whatever, but they still kind of work, or they're really old models, or just, I don't know, somebody had a farm and then died and it's an estate sale. Just look on the secondary market. Sometimes you get live traps for like $10. And $5, $10 here, there, and there to have a couple live traps to get like a rabbit farm going in case of emergency. That's a pretty good investment, and you can kind of stack them and use them for storage. So I hate dumping like $500 into something I know I'm not going to use unless there's an emergency. But if you can get them cheap enough, yeah, they take up a bit of room. But if you got a little bit of a garage and you can just kind of, like I said, put gloves in them or just whatever, I don't know. Well, there you go. Now, when it comes to like goats and cows, and yeah, that's a whole thing, and you gotta care for them, and then they all catch diseases, and then you wouldn't have any antibiotics. Not much affects native species, because if it did, they'd all die off, but cows aren't native to anywhere around here. Not to mention how they've been selectively bred to be crazy different. Cows are like the tomatoes of the living animal world. They've been so bred and crossbred and screwed with, it's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that won't survive in the wild anymore. They're fully domesticated to the point where they're dependent on humans. So it's kind of like the opposite of buffalo. In North America, you guys know, 1600s, 1700s, plenty of buffalo. They took care of themselves. They knew what to eat. They regulated themselves, and occasionally they got taken out by a wolf. Balance itself out great. You let a bunch of cows out, they're going to be dead in a season. Maybe. I don't know. Bulls and cows, In some parts of America, they could work. I know in the winter, they absolutely would not. So the northern parts where I'm at, nah. But something that big, and how do you store the meat? Then you got to smoke it or jerky or can it, and it's just this whole thing. Rabbits are just easier. And chickens are just easier. The smaller it is, the faster it replicates and the easier it is. And usually the smaller stuff just feeds itself. So another thing is any kind of fencing. If you find some garden edging fencing or something to keep rabbits in, or especially keep rabbits out, wild rabbits out of your garden. And chipmunks, any kind of, netting, keep the birds away from your strawberries, whatever you want to do. Get those supplies ahead of time, because if you're just oh, cool, I'm all set, except I need to build, 20 linear feet of fence around my beans, because trust me, rabbits and everything else will kill the crap out of your beans. I did a germination test, and 50 out of 50 got eaten by rabbits in about 7 days. And there's other things they won't touch. I planted cilantro. They won't go near it. Mustard, they won't go near it. They won't eat it. Rhubarb, they won't even touch it. I actually leave carrots out for them occasionally, because, rabbits, whatever. And they don't eat them. That's weird. But they like the wild invasive mint that is all over my neighborhood. That's kind of weird. So it helps to know what will and won't get attacked. But if it already got attacked, you got the soil ready, everything set. Maybe it took 14 days to germinate, and then it gets wiped out. That is bad. So I would just be really, really paranoid and just cover everything. Build a fence around everything. Now, as far as pests go, the general rule, when you don't have any kind of synthetic pesticides or any kind of home remedies like baking soda or any of that crap, bugs and fungi will attack weak, dead or dying or not doing well plants, and they tend to not touch healthy ones. It's not universally true. Like I said, cucumbers and tomatoes seem pretty suicidal, but just don't grow them. But if you got a perfectly healthy plant that it's not a complete and utter transplant from as far away as you can possibly get, another country, not even supposed to be in your native area, it probably won't be attacked by pests like crazy. Because if it was, it would go extinct, and the pest that ate it would go extinct. It's just that simple. So a cucumber plant that's not doing well, it had rough temperatures, it had rough, too much water than not enough water, you're going to get a fungal problem a lot quicker than a fully healthy, good to go cucumber plant. And anything with leaves, try to just, I can't even think of any exceptions. Really just trim it about 6 inches off the ground, bare minimum, because touching the soil is what's going to get the fungus to grow up into the plant. So cucumbers, any kind of lower leaves, snip them, toss the leaves. Tomatoes, absolutely mandatory. You have to do that. And then when you water stuff, don't splash up the soil from the water hitting the soil and splash it up onto the leaves. All the fungal stuff is in the soil pretty much. But I covered that in my other video. I thought I'd just throw it in there for, how to not get all your plants killed when they're halfway grown. Because at that point, there's no going back. You would need a time machine to fix that. So keep the pests out. And I will say, okay, as far as we covered bugs and fungus, which are huge, but birds and like squirrels and rabbits. So bigger animals as opposed to like microorganisms on up. Physical barriers. Otherwise, I mean, how many birds would it take to wipe out 100 stalks of corn? A lot. But I will say mine got just ravaged by ants and I didn't catch it quick enough and I lost like half my corn to ants. Didn't even know that was a thing. Ants are the worst thing to happen in your garden ever, and they replicate and they will just eat everything out of control. Okay, if it's something they will target, which is anything with sugar, they're gonna go nuts. Same with like fruit flies, but that's more of a southern thing. Have powdered borax around and sugar. They both have a shelf life of forever. Keep one jar of one jar of another, label them, mix them together, put them into like a gel or like a syrup, and then just sprinkle it anywhere there's ants, and you got dead ants. I would have a pound of borax and a pound of sugar, and considering a couple drops can kill a colony, I think that would kill every ant in the state for like 50 years. I mean, a pound of it, I think I own 2 pounds of each actually. So that's one where the pesticide is the option because both of the ingredients have a shelf life of forever. So definitely have those sitting around. You can go get a box of borax for like $2 and a pound of sugar is like 50 cents. I don't know, $1. Put them in a mason jar, seal it up. Don't even need an oxygen absorber. Don't even need a desiccant. You're good. So insects tend to be the really bad ones because you've probably heard of like, aphids, I think. Is that the one? Nematodes, they can get wild. Certain beetles, but obviously locusts. Yeah, there's no balance there. They'll just wreck your stuff. Unlimited. So if you don't have a pesticide, it's gone. So that's rough. I mean, you could keep a big bag of DT earth, diatomaceous earth. That will kill anything with a shell, anything with a carapace, any insect. It has a shelf life of forever because it's just ground up really sharp seashells. Or like ancient seashells, whatever. Sprinkle that on your plants, every insect is dead. There you go, that's the emergency. And like I said, shelf life of forever, it's pretty much a mineral. So if you want to pick up a little bit of that, it's not a terrible idea. Put it next to your borax. So that'll take out the really out of control stuff, and it's not like some pesticide where it expires every year or 2 years or something, where you can't really count on it. Now that said, look back in history, like before the 20th century and 21st century especially, what happened with like the potato blight? It was a fungus out of control. The mosaic virus, I think that's what took out the bananas, is definitely what took out some tomato crops. I mean, even just, bad weather and there goes all the grapes. Oh, a late frost. Well, the apples suck this year. By the way, it takes like 7 years for an apple tree to grow from a seed. Don't even bother. I will say crab apples, those actually grow pretty big, pretty quick. It's still on the years scale, but they're pretty much everywhere, and you can eat them. Don't eat the seeds, you'll die. They're full of cyanide, but you can eat the outsides, and it's just pure vitamin C. Not much sugar, though, not many calories. But you can make jellies and jams out of it. It's actually not bad. It's kind of like a lemon kind of jam. And it is actually literally a species of apple. Kind of goes to show how selective breeding really screwed apples up over the last couple thousand years. A lot of them are crossbred, like Granny Smith and stuff. Look up the age on that. It's not 1,000 years old. Let's put it that way. Everyone's like, I don't want GMO stuff. We've been crossbreeding stuff for centuries. Okay, like it's either fast or it's slow. Everything is GMO. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff where like I know it grows naturally. It's all over my state. People brought it in, but it grows here. Apple trees, crab apples is like you'd be waiting. That's kind of the long-term stuff. But those seeds keep for a while. A lot of the stuff at the grocery store is not sterile. It's not hybrid. It will grow. So that's one thing where like if I had some apples sitting around, I would immediately just basically put them in a blender with a blunt blade or put it on low or just smash it yourself, mash it, get rid of the mash or eat it or whatever, and then just keep the seeds. Wash them, dry them, and then put them in like an airtight little Tupperware container out of the light in a box in a bag and keep those just in case. And I'm not saying do it now. I mean, I'm just saying like if you think you're going to have to grow a farm, you're eventually going to get really sick of one or two things, potatoes and beans. You're going to be like, boy, I wish we had some apples. Oh, good thing I planted an apple tree 5 years ago. Hey, look at that. Even in some parts of my state, we have like natural blackberries. And I think I've seen it's either huckleberries or mulberries or boysenberries. It's like one of those. They all look really similar. We don't tend to have wild blueberries, though. I know a lot of you have those. So if you can find it, just steal the plants. Like I said, just take the whole plant with you, transplant it, there you go. Or bare minimum, get some seeds, get some berries, and put them down in the late fall, and hopefully in the summer, or in the spring, they'll come up. If they naturally grow in your area, great. If you're getting some exotic berry like Viking berries or something and you're in Florida, guess what? You ain't growing those. So like I said, know what grows in your area. And then look up how long it takes to grow. That's another key. And before you do any of that, look up how many calories it is. So to kind of reiterate the summary and the flow of logic in this video, that's what you do. But to look through your fridge, see what you got. I would stay away from almost any fruit. Berries are a lot easier. I wouldn't say, oh, I got 2 oranges. Cool, I'm going to grow an orange tree. No, not in almost any place in America. Pineapple, don't even try. You need such warm tropical, if it's called a tropical fruit, like if you have a can of tropical fruit mix, anything on there, mangoes, pineapple, you can't grow any of that in almost any part of America. But if you're like, I live in southern Mexico, yeah, go for it. I'm from the Caribbean. Yeah, you already know it grows in your area, so. But I covered pest control, I covered the basics of just setting it up, getting the soil ready, natural fertilizer with compost. With that all set, you're pretty much better off than the pilgrims that landed at Plymouth Rock. I don't know why they're like, oh, we'll just grow our food, and they got here and didn't know anything about farming. I'm pretty sure people 1,000 years before them knew, like, what fertilizer was. I think they were just really dumb people. Or just, like, really unwise. They didn't bring, like, a farming expert with them at all. Like, really? And then allegedly the Native Americans were like, dude, you got to put stuff in the soil. Like, put, like, fish heads and stuff. Put kelp in there. Put seaweed in there. And they're like, oh, my gosh, were those people idiots. And they kind of made it work. A lot of them starved to death. But you have the one thing that the pilgrims didn't have, which is the internet and this video. So leave a like if you enjoyed the good information. I know it was a little scattered, but I didn't stick to my notes in my outline. I know, shocking that I didn't do that. That's super not like me at all, but I got some way shorter videos coming up. A lot of you guys are like, oh, I want long format educational stuff because I drive, I got a long commute, I go to the gym for an hour, and I like your stuff, which is why some of the more educational stuff, some of the big topics where I really want to drill down, I go about an hour. Otherwise, well, we're testing some waterproof matches tomorrow, hopefully, if I can get that filmed. And it's not just, oh, look, it burns underwater, cool, okay, 1 minute video. It's going to be real world. Can you drop them in the snow? Can you light a semi-damp fire with it? Real world stuff, because we do real world gear tests, and I've got a couple of them up on my channel, but I've got a lot more planned. And I've got some gadgets, gizmos, electronics, and some more solar stuff coming. I've got a lithium-based really cool thing that I picked up and was shocked that it actually worked. It's going to blow your mind, so we got some really cool stuff. I might finally do that shoe review. Spoiler alert, they're awful, so I kind of don't want to make the review. Kind of wanted to only cover them if they were good because they're really cheap, but they're awful, so I'm procrastinating. But we got all kinds of short form content and more long form, like big content. I'm about halfway done with the notes and research for a everything you need to know about water filtration video. The different methods, what their weaknesses are, what the strengths are. I think a lot of you out there are like, hey, just boil it. Just run it through a filter and boil it, or just get a life straw. It's perfect. Oh, not even close. Not even close. Even I was surprised none of the methods that are practical are perfect, and you gotta be really careful. So we're gonna do the strengths and weaknesses, and methods and realistic, can you set it up yourself at home kind of stuff. Pros and cons, difficulty, fuel, requirements, everything. Everything. That's gonna be the next big video I do. So if you want to stick around for any of that or take a look at anything on my channel right now, feel free to do so. This channel's absolutely blowing up, which is good, but my main channel has over 50K subs, and I've been on YouTube for over 8 years, and I have over 3,000 videos between my 6 channels. So shocker, if you know what you're doing, your channel is going to do well if the content isn't garbage and you're not a moron. So on a finishing note that has nothing to do with the video, whatever anybody says, it's all luck. You get lucky if you succeed on YouTube. Absolutely false, and anybody saying that is delusional. You either are good enough and know what you're doing, or you're not. And luckily, I kind of am. And I will say, if this channel starts making more money and I can throw money into like a better camera, better mic, better amount of time out of my day, oh, the content's going to be the best on YouTube. But right now, it's a solid 6 out of 10. So subscribe for that 6 out of 10 content. It can only get better. And the bigger I get, the better it gets. So thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.